There are moments in history when the Earth itself seems to whisper, as if its layers of stone and silence remember something we do not. We dig, we measure, we date the bones and the dust, and we convince ourselves that humanity stands at the beginning of intelligence, that consciousness began with us, but beneath the certainty lies a quiet unease. The rock does not tell simple stories. It folds and burns and reforms, carrying memories older than biology, older than time as we understand it. Some of those memories do not behave like nature should. They pulse with precision, symmetry, and intent, like fingerprints left by hands we cannot imagine. What if the great extinctions were not only accidents of nature? What if they were resets? Between each layer of life, perhaps a civilization rose and vanished, its works atomized into the crust, its light forgotten except for faint isotopic scars in ancient minerals. The Oklo reactors of Gabon, the strange uranium signatures scattered across continents, the inexplicable carbon spikes frozen in Antarctic ice. These are not stories of myth, but of data that refuses to fit the model. They are anomalies that whisper of intelligence lost in the abyss of geological time. To explore them is to wander between science and heresy, between what can be proven and what refuses to die. The question that haunts every archaeologist of time is not whether they existed, but whether we will one day join them. Because if the Earth has birthed civilizations before, it will do so again, long after ours has been folded into dust. Welcome to historic sleep. If you're drawn to stories like these, the ones that live in the shadows between what we see and what was made to disappear, feel free to like and subscribe only if it feels right, and let me know in the comments where are you watching from, and what time is it for you right now. I love seeing our little map of watchers light up around the world. It begins with silence. Deep, geological silence, the kind that presses against the mind like pressure at the bottom of the ocean. 2 billion years of sleep beneath the crust, and then a spark. Not metaphorical, but literal. A sustained nuclear reaction, humming inside the bedrock of West Africa, long before the first creature ever opened an eye to see it. When scientists discovered the Oklo uranium deposits in Gabon, they expected the usual chemistry of ancient ore: random, inert, geological. What they found instead was the ghost of machinery, a system so precise that it could not be coincidence. The uranium had organized itself into perfect reactor cores. They started, sustained, and stopped their own chain reactions as if governed by invisible engineers. The rock had become a power plant, and a message. Each reactor produced around 100 kilowatts of power and operated for hundreds of thousands of years. The waste products were sealed within natural barriers of clay, untouched by radiation leaks, untouched by chaos. To call it natural is to stretch the word until it breaks. For a nuclear reactor to operate, uranium-235 must reach a concentration of about 3%. In nature, it exists at less than 1. But here, across 17 sites, the exact threshold appeared again and again. Each time, the ratio balanced perfectly, as if calculated by intention. Scientists tried to explain it with a string of miracles: unique groundwater flow, ancient oxygen levels, chemical coincidence. But the more they measured, the less random it became. It was as though something ancient, unseen, had once understood nuclear physics well enough to leave behind reactors that ran themselves for millennia. The rocks tell a story in isotopes, ratios of uranium, neptunium, and plutonium that match those found in modern reactor waste. This is not the pattern of spontaneous chemistry. It's the signature of sustained fission, of controlled reaction, of balance and restraint. And then, one day, the system shut itself down and slept again. Some say this was the Earth learning to breathe energy for the first time. Others whisper that it was evidence of something, someone, who once mastered that breath and then vanished without a trace. The Oklo reactors predate vertebrate life. They predate forests, insects, even shells. Yet they carry the unmistakable rhythm of design. If it were just Oklo, it could be anomaly. But the deeper scientists dig, the more the anomalies multiply. Uranium samples from Canada, Siberia, and Australia show enrichment levels beyond what natural decay allows. 15, even 20% uranium-235. To reach such purity requires separation technology we only mastered in the 20th century. Gas centrifuges, electromagnetic sorting, reactor cycling, none of these exist in geology. And yet their results are written in the stone. Plutonium isotopes, absent in natural ore, appear in trace quantities. Transmutation residues suggest that nuclear reactions occurred not by chance, but through sustained control at steady power levels. The planet itself becomes a fossil of intelligence. Geologists insist on natural explanations: hydrothermal sorting, selective leaching, fractionation over millions of years. But each proposed mechanism requires an impossible balance of heat, pressure, and mineral chemistry repeated across continents. The mathematics collapse under their own weight. The odds of 17 perfectly calibrated reactors forming naturally are lower than the odds of lightning assembling a working microchip. Yet the evidence persists, locked in atomic ratios that do not lie. If intelligence existed 2 billion years ago, it would have faced a world unrecognizable to us. A sky tinted orange by methane, seas thick with iron and bacterial mats, continents barren and silent. The Great Oxidation was just beginning, as cyanobacteria flooded the air with poison oxygen, triggering mass extinction. Could some species, biological or not, have retreated beneath the surface, harnessing nuclear heat to survive the catastrophe above? The idea feels like science fiction, yet the physics whisper otherwise. Nuclear energy would have been the only stable source in such a volatile biosphere. A buried civilization might have endured for eons before being swallowed by tectonic drift and the slow mercy of time. Time erases everything soft. Metal corrodes, stone folds, oceans eat the continents and give birth to new ones. What remains is not form, but chemistry. And chemistry, when precise enough, becomes a kind of language. The Oklo reactors, the isotopic anomalies scattered across the crust, the carbon signatures frozen in ice, they all form sentences written in elements rather than words. They say, something happened here, something that understood heat, containment, decay, and order. 66 million years ago, another silence fell. The Cretaceous world died in fire, and the dinosaurs vanished, or so we tell ourselves. But extinction is rarely instantaneous. The asteroid that ended their reign struck a planet already trembling. Climate had shifted, ecosystems had faltered, and carbon isotopes were misbehaving again. When NASA climatologist Gavin Schmidt proposed the Silurian hypothesis, a thought experiment suggesting that industrial civilizations might have existed before humans, he wasn't joking. He wanted to know, If such a civilization had risen 50 or 100 million years ago, how would we find its remains today? The answer, disturbingly, is that we wouldn't. The Earth is an amnesiac planet. Its memory recycles itself every 200 million years. The ocean floor is constantly reborn. The oldest crust we have is younger than the first dinosaurs. Any coastal cities, where civilizations tend to cluster, would have been subducted long ago into the mantle, melted, and reborn as magma. Even continental stone is unreliable. Mountains crumble. Wind erases detail. Within 10 million years, the greatest monuments become dust and sediment. After 100 million, even their dust becomes mineral again. And yet traces could survive, not of walls or tools, but of chemistry. Industrial activity leaves fingerprints in isotopes, in the ratios of carbon and oxygen trapped in ice or stone. In Greenland and Antarctica, ice cores preserve atmospheric histories stretching back hundreds of thousands of years. Within them, scientists found carbon-12 and carbon-13 ratios that should not exist, signatures resembling the byproducts of fossil fuel combustion, appearing long before humans existed. Alongside these spikes came traces of methane with industrial isotope ratios, and even elevated concentrations of lead and copper. No volcano, no forest fire, no natural cycle can explain them. They are brief, global pulses of artificial carbon and metal, scattered through epochs when nature should have been quiet. Some dismiss it as contamination. Others quietly admit it looks disturbingly familiar. Because when our own era's ice cores are drilled in the far future, they will show the same fingerprint. Carbon lightened by fossil fuel burning, methane thickened by industry, trace metals from smelting, lead from gasoline, and nitrogen from fertilizers. Our civilization's geological signal will look exactly like the mysterious anomalies already buried in the ice, which means one of two things is true. Either nature can mimic industry with impossible precision, or we are not the first to burn the planet. If civilizations have come and gone, their stories are written in extinction patterns. The fossil record shows 5 great die-offs, each more devastating than the last. The Permian extinction killed 96% of marine life and 70% of land species in less than 20,000 years. For nature, that's instant death. Volcanoes cannot explain the speed. Asteroids cannot explain the coordination. Oceans died first, then land, as if the collapse spread systematically, like a network shutting down. Carbon dioxide levels spiked, but the isotope balance again points not to volcanoes, but to massive releases of organic carbon, as if something burned the biosphere itself. The Earth remembers trauma chemically. Each mass extinction leaves a pulse of anomalies, sulfur layers, iridium dust, oxygen loss, carbon inversion. When we read them backward through time, they form a pattern too regular to be coincidence. Each global collapse follows an acceleration, rapid climate change, sudden biodiversity decline, atmospheric shifts, until the system resets. What if these are not random? What if each represents the end of a civilization's experiment with power, each leaving behind isotopic scars we mistake for natural catastrophe? The Great Filter hypothesis offers one chilling explanation. Somewhere between life's emergence and its mastery of the atom lies a barrier almost no species can cross. Intelligence may not be rare, it may simply be fatal. The silence of the stars is not mystery, it is warning. Every world that reaches technology discovers the same terrible equation. energy enough to reshape the planet, but not the wisdom to survive it. Maybe those Oklo reactors were not a beginning, but an ending. Maybe they are the tombstones of a species that learned too much about fire. To look at the fossilized uranium is to look into a mirror made of time. The patterns are too deliberate, the coincidences too synchronized. In a world 2 billion years younger than ours, someone may have learned the language of fission, used it to endure the dying of their sky, and then vanished so completely that only the atoms remember. We, too, build our reactors, our cities, our satellites, and tell ourselves that memory is permanent because data lives in the cloud. But the Earth eats everything. Someday, long after our oceans have boiled or frozen, long after the continents have drifted into new shapes, long after even our monuments have turned to clay, something may dig through the layers and find our isotopic ghost. It will see the same patterns we see in Oklo. Precision, where chaos should be. Symmetry, where randomness should rule. It will wonder who we were and how we died. Perhaps it will conclude that nature can sometimes dream. Or perhaps it will whisper what we are beginning to fear, that intelligence is not a miracle of evolution, but a recurring fever in the planet's long memory, always self-erasing, always doomed to rediscover the same forbidden fire. The reactors of Gabon may not prove ancient civilization, but they remind us of the one truth that echoes through every era, that the Earth forgets, but never lies. If the stones remember, then perhaps the oceans dream. Beneath the dark pressure miles below the surface, the planet hides another kind of story, one written in geometry rather than myth. The deep-sea mapping missions of the last half-century revealed patterns that should not exist in nature. Straight lines stretching for miles across the ocean floor. Circular depressions arranged in perfect grids, rectangular plateaus whose edges meet at impossible right angles. The Mariana Trench, the deepest wound on Earth, plunges 7 miles down into a silence older than continents. There, sonar scans trace shapes that echo the mathematics of design: corridors, chambers, walls. At first, they were dismissed as illusions of resolution, tricks of machine vision. But as imaging improved, the patterns became sharper, not fainter. Something precise lingers in the dark, fossilized under sediment that has been falling for hundreds of millions of years. The problem, of course, is time. Oceanic crust renews itself every 200 million years, swallowed by subduction zones and reborn in volcanic ridges. Nothing built on the sea floor should survive long enough to be seen. And yet, buried in layers older than any known seabed, strange formations persist. Some geologists argue they are ancient continental fragments, pieces of vanished lands drowned when the world shifted its plates. But a few, quietly and cautiously, suggest something else. That these are ruins of a civilization lost not in myth, but in geology. A people whose world stood where our oceans now breathe. Near the Bahamas, the Bimini Road still sparks argument between the patient and the believers. To some, it's merely a natural formation of beach rock fractured by tides into rectangular slabs. To others, it is the faintest surviving footprint of architecture, a road or harbor built when sea levels were lower, when that stretch of the Atlantic was dry and green. The blocks are aligned, evenly spaced, with edges smoothed as if by human hands. The skeptics point to chemistry, the faithful to symmetry. Between them lies the same uncertainty that haunts all of Earth's forgotten architectures, the refusal of stone to explain itself. Further west, along submerged ridges near Japan, sonar images reveal even grander structures. Terraces rising in stepped precision from the seabed, stairways carved from basalt, massive walls that catch the light like the corners of buried ziggurats. The Yonaguni Monument, as it's called, plunges into the Pacific like the half-buried dream of a drowned world. Divers who descend to its base describe corridors that twist at perfect right angles, platforms with carved reliefs, and openings that resemble doorways. Scientists argue that the structure could have formed naturally, sculpted by tectonic stress and underwater erosion. But even if nature carved it, she carved it with astonishing accuracy, block by block, line by line, as if the ocean itself had learned architecture. To imagine civilization before the sea is to stretch human memory beyond comfort. Yet during the last ice age, sea levels were 400 feet lower. Entire continents of fertile shelfland, now drowned beneath the waves, were once habitable. Rivers flowed across them, animals grazed, and perhaps somewhere, minds like ours looked at the stars and wondered what lay beyond their horizon. If humanity itself is older than we think, its earliest chapters might now sleep beneath the continental shelves, erased by the rising seas that marked the end of the Pleistocene. And if humanity is not the first, then what lived there before the last ice melted? In 1968, sonar surveys off Cuba revealed what looked like massive, symmetrical ruins 2,000 feet underwater. Columns, pyramidal shapes, walls aligned to cardinal directions. Marine geologists dismissed the claims, blaming sonar artifacts and human pattern seeking. But subsequent expeditions found rectilinear stone structures partially buried in silt, as though the ocean had quietly sealed away a memory. The site became another footnote, filed beside Bimini, Yonaguni, and the whispered name of Atlantis. A myth Plato might have inherited from civilizations older than Greece, older than Egypt, older than the flood itself. If the seas conceal such stories, the ice preserves their echoes. Beneath Antarctica's frozen skin, radar mapping has uncovered geometric anomalies hundreds of miles wide, perfect circles, corridors, and grid-like patterns hidden under 2 miles of ice. Scientists interpret them as natural formations caused by glacial movement, but their regularity remains unsettling. During the Eocene, 50 million years ago, Antarctica was not a wasteland, but a garden of forests and rivers. Fossilized wood, pollen, and even the remains of temperate vegetation confirm a world that could support life, and perhaps more. If intelligent beings once thrived there, the advancing ice may have buried them perfectly, locking their traces away in a frozen vault. Ice cores drilled from Antarctica's depths record the breath of the planet back to the dawn of complex life. Tiny bubbles of ancient air reveal abrupt changes, sudden rises in carbon dioxide, methane, and temperature that mirror our own industrial signatures. One layer, dating back 400,000 years, shows methane concentrations too high to be natural, accompanied by isotope ratios matching synthetic production. Another layer reveals spikes in heavy metals, lead, copper, zinc, distributed globally at the same time. These are not volcanic residues. Their dispersion and concentration resemble pollution. If nature caused them, she did so with eerie precision. If not, then someone else once burned, mined, and melted their way through the same arc of civilization we now tread. The ice also carries objects that defy their epoch: metallic fragments, carbon spheres, microstructured particles that resemble industrial byproducts. Contamination is always the first suspect. Yet when samples are carefully sealed, isolated from modern contact, some fragments persist. Unknown alloys, crystalline matrices of metals that should not coexist. They rest there, suspended in layers dated millions of years before human hands could have shaped anything. Scientists call them curiosities and move on. But curiosity, repeated enough, becomes a map. What if the map connects Oklo's reactors, enriched uranium scattered across continents, anomalous carbon and metal signatures in ancient ice, the alignment of oceanic structures that refuse randomness? Each on its own is improbable. Together they form a constellation of questions, too far apart to touch, yet too consistent to dismiss. If these are not accidents, they belong to a pattern of intelligence that rose and fell long before ours. The Earth may not remember its faces, but it remembers their chemistry. Imagine such a civilization, its rise unseen, its end absolute. They might have walked beneath skies heavy with methane, beneath a dimmer sun, when continents sat differently. Perhaps they mastered the same equations we did, built machines that burned the same fuels, split the same atoms, and fell to the same blindness. They might have looked up, as we do, and wondered if they were alone, unaware that their predecessors had already vanished beneath stone and ice. Every new civilization could be only the next iteration of a recurring experiment, the planet's endless rehearsal of intelligence, each doomed to destroy its stage and be replaced by silence. Some geologists, cautious but brave, now speak of technosignatures in the geological record, chemical fingerprints of artificial activity. They are not looking for pottery or bones, but for changes in isotope balance, for elements distributed too evenly, too globally. One such layer already bears our mark: a thin film of plastic microfibers, radioactive dust from nuclear detonations, and soot from combustion. In 100,000 years, it will fossilize into a black band across the rock column. Perhaps other bands like it already exist, ancient, buried, unread. If so, our place in history changes. We are not the first fire, but the latest ember, the great filter, the unseen barrier that keeps the galaxy silent, may not lie in the stars, but in the soil. Civilizations may bloom often, burn brightly, and then vanish beneath their own heat, leaving behind nothing but isotopic whispers. We have found those whispers in stone and ice, but we refuse to hear them. We call them natural because we fear what it would mean if they were not. And yet, the evidence waits patiently. In the Antarctic interior, under miles of frozen time, anomalies in radar data show vast hollow regions, cavities too geometric to be explained by simple meltwater flow. Inside one such region near Lake Vostok, instruments detected magnetic disturbances and temperature gradients inconsistent with the surrounding ice. Some interpret it as geological curiosity. Others, quietly, compare it to the heat signature of buried structures. The treaty that governs Antarctica forbids private excavation. What lies beneath may remain sealed until the ice itself chooses to give it back. The ice does not melt evenly. It fractures, sighs, and exhales ancient air. One day, perhaps centuries from now, the world will awaken to the sound of collapsing ice cliffs, and what has slept for 50 million years will finally see light again. What will emerge may not be fossils but artifacts, things that once were tools, cities, or even machines, now mineralized into shapes the living cannot recognize. And if they are found, if even one is proven real, then everything we know about time will fracture. History will not be a line, but a spiral, looping through extinction and rebirth, forever haunted by civilizations that learned, forgot, and vanished. The ocean knows this already. The ice remembers. The earth, for all its forgetfulness, keeps faint traces of its own dreams. Perhaps that is why the anomalies call to us, not to reveal their secrets, but to remind us that the silence beneath our feet is not emptiness. It is memory, patient and exact, waiting for another voice to ask the same forbidden question. What if we were never first? There is a moment when you stand beneath the desert sky at night that the stars begin to feel too close, as if memory itself hangs above you, frozen in the heavens. The ancients called them gods, messengers, or the eyes of creation. But perhaps they were something more literal, witnesses to a cosmic repetition that began long before our recorded time. Because if the Earth once hosted civilizations lost to erosion and silence, then the question that follows is terrifyingly simple. Were they alone? Or did they look upward, as we do, and wonder if intelligence existed beyond their world? The silence of the stars is not an empty one. It is dense, deliberate, full of equations that end in extinction. Astronomers call it the Fermi paradox, the contradiction between the vast number of potential habitable worlds and the absolute absence of contact. The galaxy should be teeming with voices, yet all we hear is static. The Great Filter hypothesis tries to explain this silence. Something, somewhere, destroys almost every intelligent civilization before it can spread among the stars. Perhaps it is cosmic accident, perhaps self-inflicted collapse. But when we examine the geological record, we begin to see something unsettling. The filter might not be out there. It might already be here, written in the layers of our own planet. For billions of years, life has flickered in and out of existence like a cosmic heartbeat. From the Great Oxidation to the Permian extinction, from the volcanic winters to the frozen cataclysms of ice, each cycle ends the same way. Rapid collapse, sudden silence, followed by rebirth. Every time, complexity rises, innovates, and then vanishes, leaving chemical fingerprints that puzzle scientists for generations. In that pattern, the filter becomes not a mystery, but a mechanism. Intelligence may be the planet's way of burning off excess order, a fever that flares when evolution becomes too successful. When the fever passes, the slate is wiped clean, and the process begins again. Imagine a timeline stretched across 4 billion years, and mark humanity's presence as a single flicker at the end. Now imagine another flicker somewhere in the middle, perhaps a species that mastered the atom long before oxygen filled the skies, or one that lived beneath methane seas, or one that walked across a Venus still blue and warm. Their evidence would not look like ours. It would not leave skyscrapers or satellites, but isotopes, altered mineral ratios, anomalies in heat and magnetism. We might be standing atop the ruins of countless civilizations and never know it, because the Earth recycles its bones. Even the Moon, our silent companion, may carry fragments of their story. Unlike Earth, the Moon does not forget. Its surface has no atmosphere, no wind, no rain. Every impact, every footprint, every grain of dust remains. When asteroids strike Earth, they blast debris into space, some of which lands on the Moon. Over billions of years, Trillions of tons of terrestrial rock have fallen there, preserving samples of our planet's surface from every era. Within those layers might lie fossilized traces of worlds we never knew. Ancient isotopes, synthetic compounds, even microscopic artifacts from civilizations erased on Earth but immortalized in lunar dust. When Apollo astronauts returned with their samples, some contained isotopic signatures inconsistent with modern geology, ratios of oxygen and titanium that hinted at unknown processes. Most were explained away as natural variations, yet the anomalies persist in the data. The moon's far side, shielded from Earth's radiation and untouched by weathering, may still hide the untouched archive of planetary history. If we ever establish permanent lunar bases, one of their first tasks should not be mining, but archaeology. The moon may be the library of every age that has ever burned and vanished on Earth. To understand how fragile civilization truly is, we must think in terms of geological pressure, not historical time. Consider how tectonics reshapes the continents. Entire mountain ranges crumble, oceans shift, deserts bloom where forests once stood. In a few million years, the Atlantic will close and the Himalayas will erode into sand. Human civilization is not built to withstand that scale of transformation. In 1 million years, every skyscraper, every satellite, every monument will have disintegrated. In 10 million, even the bones of our cities will be unrecognizable. And yet, certain signatures, carbon spikes, isotopic distortions, metal anomalies, will persist, faint but measurable. Those are the same signatures we find scattered throughout ancient strata. The fossil record itself may be an incomplete conversation between species that never met. During the Cambrian explosion, 540 million years ago, life suddenly diversified into complex, intelligent forms with eyes, nervous systems, and predatory strategies. Evolutionary models struggle to explain the speed. Genetic evidence suggests that entire developmental toolkits appeared fully formed, as though introduced from elsewhere. Some scientists propose horizontal gene transfer as the mechanism, genetic material passed not through lineage, but across species, as if information itself spread through the biosphere like an idea. Others quietly speculate about directed evolution, that perhaps something or someone guided the process. If the Earth has been home to intelligence before, it may have also been the laboratory in which intelligence was made. We tend to believe intelligence is rare, yet every corner of the cosmos shows potential. Mars once had rivers and lakes, an atmosphere rich in carbon dioxide, and clay deposits that indicate long-term water stability. Ancient craters display layered sediment consistent with microbial colonies. Recent discoveries even found organic molecules and seasonal methane emissions that hint at biological processes. But what if life on Mars didn't merely exist, it thrived? Suppose a civilization rose during its habitable epoch 3 or 4 billion years ago, mastering energy and engineering under a fading sun. When the planet's magnetic field collapsed and its atmosphere was stripped away, they would have had no choice but to burrow underground or migrate elsewhere. Perhaps they didn't die. They left. Perhaps some of the material ejected from Martian impacts reached Earth, carrying their blueprints with it. Panspermia, the theory that life spreads between worlds, might not describe biology alone but memory. Venus, too, carries the fingerprints of paradise lost. Computer models show that for nearly 2 billion years, it had oceans, mild temperatures, and stable climates. Then, a runaway greenhouse effect turned it into a furnace. What caused the tipping point? Volcanic outgassing alone cannot explain the rapidity of the transformation. Something accelerated the process. Some planetary scientists speculate about a feedback loop. Industrial-scale carbon emissions or massive geoengineering gone wrong. If a civilization once lived there, their final act may have been the accidental reshaping of their entire world. Venus's current atmosphere, dense with carbon dioxide and sulfuric acid, still holds trace gases that shouldn't exist, including phosphine, which on Earth is produced primarily by life. It may be the last exhalation of a planet that burned itself alive. When we place Mars, Venus, and Earth side by side, a chilling symmetry emerges. 3 worlds, once capable of life, now reduced to one survivor. Perhaps the Great Filter is not a single event, but a process, a sequence every intelligent species repeats. First, they ignite the fire of industry. Second, they unbalance their planet. Third, they vanish. The silence of the stars is the sum of all these endings, multiplied across galaxies. If that is true, then every world with oceans and air contains its own ghost story waiting to be discovered. The deeper we look, the more the ghosts seem to answer. Uranium anomalies in ancient rock layers, too rich, too organized. Carbon isotopes in ice cores, too modern, too sudden. Metallic fragments embedded in coal seams millions of years old, too artificial. Taken together, they form a whisper. This has happened before. The question that follows is whether it will happen again. We think of civilization as progression, as forward motion. But what if it's circular? A cycle of discovery and collapse, each turning of the wheel erasing the last. The Earth is a self-cleaning archive, one that deletes its data with every new epoch. The only way to survive such cycles would be to encode memory into materials that transcend decay. Diamond, crystal, isotope, orbit. Maybe that's why the moon holds what Earth forgets. Maybe that's why some of our myths speak of gods descending from the sky, beings returning to a planet they once called home, finding it repopulated by a species that believes itself first. When you begin to think this way, myth and science start to blur. The story of Atlantis becomes not a fantasy, but a metaphor for memory, the recurring loss of civilizations swallowed by the sea. The flood myths of Mesopotamia, the gods of Egypt descending in ships of light, the Sumerian tales of beings who shaped humanity, all could be distant echoes of the same cycle, translated into language our ancestors could understand. Even our own scientific terms, filters, extinctions, resets, carry the same fatal rhythm. We speak of evolution as progress, but nature only knows equilibrium. When intelligence disturbs that balance, the system corrects itself. Perhaps that is the true function of extinction, to erase the arrogance of species that rise too high. The Earth does not punish, it balances. The Great Filter, then, is not a cosmic assassin waiting beyond the stars, but a planetary immune system, ensuring that no civilization survives long enough to destabilize the whole. Every world with life carries within it the seeds of its own reset. Mars cooled, Venus burned, Earth endures, for now. And so, when we look into the night sky and wonder why it is so quiet, the answer may not be distance, but repetition. The silence is not empty. It is crowded with ghosts, civilizations that came and went, each leaving behind the same faint signatures, the same isotopic echoes, the same chemical confessions. Somewhere in that silence, the Earth's earlier intelligences may still be whispering, Not in language, but in pattern. We were here. We failed. Remember us. Whether we will listen before the next reset is still unknown. The deeper one looks into the planet's past, the more it begins to resemble a palimpsest, a manuscript written over so many times that only faint shadows of its first script remain. What we call prehistoric might only be the absence of memory, not the absence of civilization. Beneath every field and mountain, there could be an erased paragraph of human or non-human story. And yet, every so often, something leaks through, something that doesn't fit the neat geological sequence. Strange objects in impossible rock, manufactured metals trapped in coal, spheres carved before hands existed. Science calls them out-of-place artifacts, but the term is just a polite way of saying, we don't know how this exists. The record begins in the 19th century. Miners in Scotland cut through sandstone nearly 400 million years old and found an iron nail embedded in its heart. The strata were untouched, the iron fused within the stone. Similar discoveries appeared elsewhere. A bell-shaped metal vessel within solid rock in Massachusetts, a delicate gold chain inside a lump of coal from Illinois. Mysterious spheres, perfectly balanced and grooved, extracted from Precambrian deposits in South Africa, rocks older than multicellular life itself. Most were ridiculed, many lost, some quietly locked away. But every so often, one resisted explanation. The Wolfsegg iron, found in Austria in 1885, remains the most disturbing. Encased in brown coal dated to 20 million years old, it's a perfect metallic cube with beveled edges and symmetrical grooves cut across its surface. Analysis showed the metal composition was not natural. High-purity iron alloyed with trace elements that do not coexist in nature. The surface bore marks of machining, smooth, deliberate, geometric. If it were a hoax, it was an impossible one for the time. If it were natural, it violated physics. If it were genuine, it rewrote the story of life. Of course, mainstream geology insists on more mundane explanations: contamination, misidentification, or mineral pseudomorphs. But beneath that caution lies a quiet discomfort, because a few of these objects have been tested and found truly anomalous. Under X-ray analysis, certain metallic inclusions in coal show crystalline structures consistent with cast alloys, not ore formation. Others contain isotopic ratios hinting at refined metal. Iron that had been melted and cooled, not precipitated in stone. How does one explain that, when the coal that trapped it formed hundreds of millions of years before humans were supposed to exist? The temptation, always, is to call it myth, to say that nature plays tricks, that coincidences assemble artifacts. But coincidences, when they multiply, begin to look like pattern. What if these artifacts are not relics of our own kind, but remnants of those forgotten cycles, the civilizations erased by the Great Filter, buried by the planet's hunger for renewal? If so, then each out-of-place object becomes not anomaly, but evidence, a tiny fossil of intelligence hidden in the stone. The argument is not new. In 1969, a Soviet geologist named Dr. V.A. Chernov proposed the metal memory hypothesis, that the Earth's crust may contain artifacts from previous technological epochs recycled through tectonic processes. He suggested that intelligent life could have existed in deep time, long before the Cambrian explosion, and that plate subduction might have buried its remains, later exhumed by mining. His papers vanished into obscurity, dismissed as Cold War pseudoscience. But decades later, nuclear chemists analyzing uranium deposits began to notice something that sounded eerily familiar: isotope distributions in natural ores that matched the waste patterns of artificial reactors. The deeper scientists dig, the stranger the data becomes. In some mines, enriched uranium-235 concentrations reach levels impossible without artificial refinement. Plutonium isotopes, normally absent from nature, appear in measurable quantities, as do decay products of elements only produced in reactors. These patterns repeat across continents, suggesting either global geological coincidence or global technological origin. If one accepts the first, one must also accept that nature itself operates like an engineer: precise, consistent, deliberate. If one accepts the second, one must accept that we are latecomers to a world already built and abandoned. Even stranger evidence hides in chemistry rather than stone. Marine sediment cores, drilled deep beneath the Pacific, reveal layers with carbon isotope anomalies identical to those of industrial emissions. These layers coincide with abrupt biodiversity collapse and elevated heavy metal concentrations: lead, zinc, mercury. Natural explanations exist, but none align perfectly. Volcanic events leave sulfur signatures that these layers lack. Meteor impacts leave iridium and shock quartz, again absent. The layers themselves are thin, global, simultaneous, a flash of artificial fingerprint, then silence. It is possible, then, that the Earth bears a recurring scar: civilizations that rise, industrialize, and vanish so completely that only their chemistry remains. Our current age will leave a similar one. Future geologists, millions of years from now, will find a black line of plastic polymers, a spike of carbon lightened by fossil fuels, and radioactive dust from atomic tests. They will see it, measure it, and ask what species left such a mark, and why it disappeared. Perhaps that is what we are doing now, unknowingly reading the same question in layers of stone left by those before us. Even our myths, if read carefully, seem to echo the idea of forgotten worlds. The Sumerian king list speaks of rulers who reigned for tens of thousands of years before a great flood swept over the land. In Hindu cosmology, the world renews itself through endless cycles of destruction and rebirth, the kalpas and yugas, each beginning when the gods reset creation. Plato's Atlantis was not merely a parable, but a memory inherited from priests of Egypt, who claimed the island perished 9,000 years before his time, swallowed by the sea. Modern archaeology scoffs, but now that radar and sonar have mapped drowned plains beneath the Atlantic, the myth seems less like fantasy and more like geological metaphor. In the deserts of Africa and Arabia, satellite imagery reveals massive hexagonal patterns etched into rock, so vast they are visible only from the air. Archaeologists call them kites, ancient hunting traps built by early humans, but some of them predate organized agriculture. Their alignments trace celestial paths, not animal migrations. To build them required geometry, surveying, and astronomical knowledge beyond what conventional history assigns to their makers. They could be remnants of an earlier knowledge system, one inherited, perhaps unconsciously, from an age that had already passed through the fire. If these artifacts and patterns are fragments of forgotten ages, then what destroyed them? Natural disaster? Self-inflicted ruin? Perhaps both. Every great extinction bears the signature of imbalance. Runaway warming, runaway cooling, sudden atmospheric shifts. Each time, the planet restores itself through violence, as though purging the infection of intelligence. When cyanobacteria filled the air with oxygen, they poisoned the biosphere that created them. When our ancestors discovered combustion, we began the same process, burning the air we breathe. The pattern is recursive. Life evolves intelligence. Intelligence extracts energy. Energy destabilizes the environment. The system resets. Intelligence, it seems, is not progress, but entropy given mind. The question that haunts modern scientists is whether memory itself could survive such cycles. If civilizations rise and fall endlessly, could any one of them have found a way to speak across epochs, to leave a message that endures the recycling of continents? The answer may lie not in monuments, but in code, genetic code. Some researchers speculate that DNA itself could serve as an intertemporal archive, a biological medium capable of storing information for billions of years, passed quietly through evolution. Hidden within the non-coding regions of genomes, the so-called junk DNA, there could be messages, patterns, or structures deliberately embedded long ago. The idea sounds fantastical, but experiments have already encoded images, sound, and text into synthetic DNA molecules. The medium works. The question is whether someone else used it first. If ancient intelligence understood biology better than we do, they may not have built monuments of stone, but organisms of memory, creatures designed to survive extinctions, carrying fragments of data within their genes. Evolution would hide and copy their work endlessly, turning message into mechanism. One might even argue that consciousness itself, the strange self-awareness that flickers in humans and perhaps in others before us, could be a kind of awakening signal, an emergent echo of programming embedded long ago. When the conditions are right, the code reactivates, the world remembers itself, and civilization begins again. The philosopher Teilhard de Chardin once said that evolution is the universe becoming aware of itself. But what if the universe already was aware, and we are merely its recurring memory? What if the Earth uses intelligence the way a body uses fever to burn away imbalance, to reset? The out-of-place artifacts, the isotopic scars, the anomalous metal, all of it could be the residue of that cycle, glimpses of forgotten fever dreams written in iron and dust. Every age believes it is the first to awaken, and every age forgets the ashes it stands on. The Wolf's Egg iron, the Oklo reactors, the uranium anomalies, they are not proof, but reminders. They tell us that certainty is dangerous, that memory is fragile, that progress is only a story we tell ourselves between extinctions. Beneath our feet, a billion years of silence hums with potential energy, waiting for the next experiment in consciousness to begin. And when it does, it will think itself unique, unaware that it walks through the ruins of all who came before. Perhaps that is the final truth hidden in the rock. Not that there were civilizations before us, but that there will be civilizations after, born from the same dust, destined to repeat the same mistakes, and eventually to leave behind their own impossible artifacts for someone else to find. History does not ascend, it orbits. The planet does not remember names, only patterns. And somewhere, deep in its crust, the next story is already being written. Beneath the mathematical silence of the stars, beneath the geological forgetting of the Earth, there runs a quieter, more personal terror. The possibility that intelligence itself is not a miracle, but a habit, that consciousness rises, burns, and erases itself like a fever repeating through epochs. and that what we call progress is only one more turn of an endless wheel. When the first humans looked up at the night sky, they saw gods. When we look up, we see equations. But perhaps the gods and the equations are the same story told in different languages, each an attempt to understand the faint echoes of civilizations that came before. In the ruins of Saqqara, archaeologists once found a sealed shaft buried beneath layers of collapsed sand. Inside were tools that shouldn't exist. Cut stones polished as if by machine, diorite vases drilled through with holes so narrow and perfectly circular that even modern diamond bits struggle to replicate them. These were made over 5,000 years ago, in a time when copper chisels were the most advanced technology known to man. Egyptologists call it mastery of craft. Engineers who've examined the cuts call it impossible. And yet the objects are real, remnants of a knowledge that appeared too early, as though inherited rather than invented. Civilization seems to bloom in sudden bursts, as if awakened from within rather than developed from without. The Sumerians appeared out of nowhere with writing, law, and astronomy. The Egyptians with architecture so precise it aligns with stars. The Indus Valley cities with plumbing, standard measurements, and urban planning. No slow learning curve, no scattered experimentation, only sudden mastery, followed by gradual decay. It is almost as if each civilization remembered something briefly, like a dream fading at dawn, then forgot again. Every rebirth carries fragments of the last, but never the whole. In the highlands of Bolivia, at a site called Puma Punku, megalithic blocks lie scattered like toys abandoned by titans. They weigh hundreds of tons, carved with interlocking precision that defies explanation. The andesite stone is harder than steel, and yet each corner is cut to micrometer accuracy, forming shapes that resemble machine parts more than temples. Some of the blocks fit together like modular systems, as though they were once part of an engineered structure rather than a ritual monument. The local legends say the site was built in a single night by the gods who came from the stars. The carbon dating says the stones are 12,000 years old, older than any known culture capable of shaping them. But what if older than known simply means older than remembered? If the geological record can bury entire continents, why not entire histories? Perhaps the builders of Puma Punku, like those of Saqqara, were not inventors but inheritors, using techniques handed down from an age that had already vanished. Technology lost, language eroded, purpose forgotten. Only the precision remains, fossilized in stone. Similar enigmas surface across the globe. In Belbek, Lebanon, lies a terrace of stones weighing over 1,000 tons each, forming part of an ancient foundation that even the Romans could not explain. The modern quarry nearby still holds one unfinished block, massive and perfect, as though its makers vanished mid-construction. In India's Ellora caves, entire temples are carved from single cliffs of basalt, hollowed with such mathematical precision that they seem more printed than chiseled. In Turkey's Göbekli Tepe, vast stone circles arranged with astronomical alignment predate agriculture by 6,000 years, suggesting that complex societies existed before farming. The pattern repeats, a burst of genius out of nowhere, a flowering of intelligence that defies linear history, followed by collapse and forgetting. What if these sudden appearances are not anomalies but recurrences? What if each represents the resurfacing of a deeper, older intelligence, buried but not destroyed. The evidence may not be technological, but biological. In our own DNA lie genetic anomalies, fragments that appear too complex, too optimized to have arisen through random mutation alone. Some scientists refer to them as genomic islands of innovation, sequences that seem inserted rather than evolved. A few researchers, far outside the mainstream, have suggested that these could be ancient code, artificial insertions left by previous intelligences. It is an idea dismissed as fringe, yet the more we decode the genome, the more it behaves like software written by unknown hands. If the planet itself has been host to cycles of intelligence, then the genetic record may be the bridge between them. Consciousness might not be reborn from nothing but reawakened from within. The spark doesn't fall from the sky, it ignites from DNA that remembers. And when the environment becomes stable enough, when climate, chemistry, and atmosphere align, the code activates, and the Earth dreams itself awake again. Humanity may simply be the latest awakening, an iteration of a long experiment repeating over billions of years. There are ancient traditions that seem to hint at this idea without the language of science. The Vedic texts speak of ages called yugas, vast cycles of creation and forgetting, where knowledge rises to perfection before decaying into darkness. The Mesoamerican long count calendar describes worlds that ended not by divine punishment, but by natural renewal, each humanity erased to make room for the next. Even the Bible's flood, stripped of theology, reads like a memory of catastrophic reset, a planetary cleansing that erased one order to birth another. Each myth is a geological allegory, written by survivors who sensed that history itself was circular. If one reads the myths of creation across continents, a single thread emerges. The gods come from the sky, they teach humanity, and then they leave. They are not ethereal beings, but visitors, architects, engineers, bearers of knowledge. Whether these gods were literal or metaphorical hardly matters. Their pattern is consistent with the rhythm of lost civilizations awakening, reaching outward, then disappearing. When the knowledge fades, what remains are stories of light descending, of voices teaching, of fire given to clay. Prometheus, Thoth, Quetzalcoatl, Enki, the same archetype under different skies. Each age remembers its teachers, but not their world. Perhaps they were not aliens, but ancestors, the remnants of the previous cycle, returning to guide the next before fading again into myth. If so, then the line between archaeology and mythology is an illusion. We are not uncovering the ruins of the first civilization. We are uncovering our own footprints from a previous life. The same instincts, the same curiosities, the same mistakes. Every discovery is déjà vu written in stone. The deeper we study our planet, the clearer it becomes that it has mechanisms of erasure built into its design. The constant motion of tectonic plates swallows entire oceans of history. Glaciers grind the past to powder. Volcanoes bury it in molten oblivion. Even the wind, the simplest sculptor of all, smooths memory into anonymity. In this environment, survival of evidence becomes the exception, not the rule. To expect intact ruins from millions of years ago is to misunderstand the brutality of geological time. What can survive are not monuments but signals, chemical, genetic, magnetic. And those signals, faint though they are, already exist. Consider the isotope anomalies, the unexplained nuclear ratios, the carbon spikes, the sudden floods of methane in pre-human strata. all consistent with industrial activity. These are not myths, they are measurable facts. Whether they represent nature's oddities or intelligence's fingerprints depends only on interpretation. But if we interpret them as the latter, then they form a record of planetary memory. Civilizations rising and falling like the tide, each leaving a thin film of artificial chemistry in the rock. And we are next in that sequence. The question is whether we can break it. Can a species remember itself deeply enough to avoid its own extinction? Can we learn from patterns written not in text, but in element? The evidence suggests the answer is grim. Every previous intelligence, if it existed, reached the same threshold we now approach. Control of nuclear energy, manipulation of climate, mastery of information, and the illusion of invincibility. Each burned too brightly, too fast, and each collapsed into silence. We are no different, only more aware of the repetition. The great filter may not be in front of us, it may already be inside us, encoded in the same impulse that drives progress. Still, there is hope, faint but real, in the awareness itself. To recognize the cycle is to stand outside it, even for a moment. If we are the latest iteration of a recurring intelligence, then perhaps consciousness, the true legacy of all those forgotten ages, is trying, through us, to finally break free. We are its memory, learning to look backward. Our science, our myths, our dreams, they are fragments of the same cosmic recursion, all whispering the same truth, that nothing is ever truly lost, only transformed, buried, waiting. And so every anomaly in the rock, every artifact that refuses classification, every myth that feels older than humanity, may be part of that message. They tell us softly that we are not the beginning, but the continuation. That we are the earth remembering itself once more. And that unless we learn to listen to the isotopes, the stone, the silence, we will join the chorus of civilizations erased, our own cities turned to dust, our memory reduced to chemistry. Perhaps, deep beneath future oceans, someone or something will one day unearth a shard of our world, a fragment of circuit board fossilized in stone, a sliver of glass that once framed a human face, a microchip embedded in ancient silt. They will analyze it, wonder who made it, and write stories about us. They will argue, as we do now, whether it was natural or artificial, myth or evidence. And in their doubt, the cycle will begin again, because the earth is not cruel, only cyclical. It creates intelligence to see itself, then buries that intelligence when the seeing becomes too bright. It forgets in order to remember differently. We, too, are part of that process, the current fever of awareness burning across the crust, destined to cool. But before we vanish, we can at least acknowledge what the stones already know, that intelligence is ancient, that memory is geological, and that every civilization is both discovery and echo. Perhaps the greatest act of awareness we can achieve is not to survive forever, but to finally understand the rhythm that made us, to accept that the universe dreams through us, learns through our failures, and writes through our ruins. The stone does not lie. It only waits. And in the end, every civilization, past or future, must return to that silence where the next begins. Every age leaves behind a silence, and within that silence, the earth begins to rewrite. Erosion, tectonics, and pressure, these are the editors of deep time. They smooth the past, compress it, and fold it into something that looks like nature again. But sometimes, when the surface breaks open, when a desert wind clears away centuries of dust, or when ice melts from a forgotten plateau, a fragment of something unnatural appears. A straight edge, a drilled hole, a geometry that doesn't belong to randomness. Archaeology calls it anomaly. Myth calls it memory. Both are right. In 1973, a Soviet expedition in the Pamir Mountains uncovered metallic fragments embedded in quartz veins dated over 100,000 years old. Some were spiraled like screws, others shaped like precision bearings. Later analysis revealed tungsten and molybdenum alloys, metals that require high-temperature smelting, impossible for any known ancient culture. The scientists assumed contamination until they realized the distribution was too deep, too consistent, too old. The findings were quietly classified, the samples lost to reorganization. But the photographs remain, tiny, perfect coils trapped in rock that predated Homo sapiens. Similar discoveries followed. In Russia's Ural region, miners unearthed miniature spirals of copper and tungsten, only millimeters in size, embedded in Pleistocene sediments. Their density and uniformity suggested mass production. Under microscopy, they showed wear patterns, even threading, as though they once formed part of a machine. To believe they were natural would require nature herself to become an engineer. To believe they were artificial demands that we accept intelligence older than humanity. So the debate became another act of forgetting. Forgetting is the Earth's most sophisticated technology. It hides its secrets in plain sight, under time. But as our tools of detection sharpen, we begin to see its patterns differently. Satellite imaging, hyperspectral scanning, and ground-penetrating radar now reveal that what we once thought were mountains or dunes often conceal structures beneath. Rectilinear voids, magnetic anomalies, underground corridors running for miles. Across the Sahara, radar surveys have mapped geometric formations buried beneath dunes, perfectly aligned to cardinal directions. They resemble city grids, complete with avenues and foundations, erased by 10,000 years of shifting sand. The Sahara was once a sea of green, threaded by rivers and lakes. Fossilized pollen, fish skeletons, and petrified forests tell of an age when it teemed with life. If an advanced civilization had flourished there before the desert came, the rising sands would have entombed it completely. Perhaps that's why the myths of North Africa speak of golden cities swallowed by dunes, of gods who walked among men before the sands rose to claim them. The Greeks called it the land of the West. The Egyptians called it the place of beginnings. Somewhere under that ocean of dust, the first or last civilization may sleep. In the Amazon, the opposite problem hides the same truth. Beneath dense rainforest canopy, aerial LiDAR has revealed vast networks of roads, canals, and pyramids stretching across thousands of square miles. For centuries, explorers thought the jungle had always been untouched wilderness. But the soil itself tells another story. Layers of terra preta, human-engineered black earth rich with carbon, appear throughout the basin, showing deliberate cultivation over millennia. This was not primitive farming. It was bioengineering. The people who created it understood carbon cycles better than modern science until recently rediscovered them. And then, like all who came before, they vanished, leaving behind only a fertile whisper of their genius. The symmetry between desert and jungle is haunting. Both hide their cities beneath overwhelming abundance, one of sand, the other of life. Both erase, both preserve. In both, we find the ghost of a lost intelligence that rose, adapted the planet to its will, and then disappeared. To see the pattern is to recognize that civilization is not an invention, but a reoccurrence. The Earth seems to remember how to build cities, how to channel rivers, how to align stone with the stars. The same geometries reappear across continents, separated by oceans and millennia, as though drawn from a single source code embedded in the planet itself. At Giza, the pyramids align almost perfectly with the cardinal points. So do the pyramids of Teotihuacan, of China's Xi'an, and of the Nubian desert. Even the mounds of Cahokia and the steppe terraces of South America follow similar orientations, north-south, east-west, marking solstices and equinoxes with mathematical precision. Mainstream archaeology calls it coincidence, the product of universal human fascination with the sky. But that explanation avoids the larger question. Why the same astronomical constants, the same scaling ratios, the same architectural mathematics? The structures are not just aligned to the stars, they encode them, their proportions mirroring orbital harmonics and precessional cycles. It is as though each civilization was rebuilding a template from memory, not invention. Some physicists, crossing into forbidden territory, suggest that consciousness itself might be geological, that intelligence arises not from biology, but from information fields embedded within matter. If that is true, then civilization is less a biological phenomenon than a planetary one, a repeating pattern in the lithosphere's evolution. Under this view, the planet thinks intermittently, its crust producing civilizations as transient bursts of computation, each one burning brightly, generating data, and then erasing itself. The anomalies we find, out-of-place artifacts, precise megaliths, isotopic scars, are not remnants of specific species, but residues of the planet's thinking. The Earth dreaming through chemistry, briefly sentient, then silent again. And yet, we resist that idea because it removes our uniqueness. We want to be the first, the chosen, the inevitable. But perhaps inevitability itself is the illusion. When you trace the history of technological emergence, from fire to metallurgy, from writing to digital systems, the intervals shrink. Progress accelerates, then collapses. Each revolution consumes less time, each peak steeper, each fall more absolute. If such acceleration continues unchecked, it ends not in utopia, but in implosion. Maybe every intelligent species, every cycle, reaches this singularity, where knowledge outpaces wisdom, where technology outruns morality, and then the planet resets, burying the evidence before starting again. That possibility makes the silence of the stars less a mystery than a mercy. If the same pattern repeats across worlds, then the galaxy may be full of ruins hidden beneath regenerated crusts, quiet planets that once dreamed of progress and now rest in geological peace. The absence of alien contact isn't proof of emptiness, it's proof of recurrence. Every intelligent world may pass through this same fever, each leaving behind its own isotopic epitaph. The cosmos could be littered with memories too ancient for light to carry. Our own record will be easy to read from space. An atmosphere thickened by carbon, a layer of plastic sediment, traces of radioactive isotopes, the spectral glare of artificial light. We are already writing our extinction layer. In that sense, the Earth has seen this story before. The pattern is familiar, the chemistry predictable. And maybe that is why we are beginning to sense something, why the myths of ancient floods and burning skies feel like premonitions. We are remembering through the planet itself. If memory is cyclic, then so is warning. Every civilization might leave messages encoded in the medium that survives longest: math, geometry, frequency, the Fibonacci spiral, the golden ratio, the precession of equinoxes, all universal constants. Some researchers have noticed that ancient monuments encode these numbers with uncanny precision, as though their builders wanted to transmit not culture, but survival code. Guidelines for balancing with planetary systems, warnings against excess energy extraction, reminders of previous collapse. If so, then we are the recipients of those messages, and we are ignoring them. Because progress, for all its brilliance, is amnesiac. We measure, we document, but we forget what the numbers mean. We've learned to split the atom, but not to survive it. We've mapped the genome, but not the consciousness that drives it. We build towers higher than any before us, forgetting that the last age did the same, and that the ruins of their towers now lie beneath the ocean. Our greatest danger is not ignorance, but repetition. Yet, perhaps that repetition is not punishment. Maybe it is the only way the universe learns, through endless trial and error, through the rise and fall of civilizations like waves crashing on a cosmic shore. Each one refines the same question: how can intelligence exist without self-destruction? So far, none have answered. But maybe the answer cannot come from intellect alone. Maybe it requires humility, the realization that intelligence is not mastery over the planet, but participation within it. The traces left by ancient builders, the anomalous isotopes, the impossible artifacts, they all point toward a lesson. Power without balance ends in silence. The Earth does not need to destroy us, it only needs to continue. We destroy ourselves. The geological record is a graveyard of hubris, each layer a cautionary tale. We are writing the next one now, atom by atom, unaware that our future archaeologists, if they exist, will puzzle over our ruins the way we puzzle over theirs. Still, there is beauty in the pattern. To exist at all, to rise, to think, to vanish, is to be part of the planet's long rhythm of remembering and forgetting. Every civilization, no matter how advanced, becomes a layer in that rhythm, contributing its chemistry, its code, its silence. Perhaps the purpose of intelligence is not to endure, but to leave behind resonance, to ensure that, when the next awakening comes, something remains to guide it, even if it is only a whisper in stone. In the end, maybe that's all we are, whispers in stone, the coils in the quartz, the black layer in the rock, the geometry beneath the sand. Proof that intelligence is not anomaly, but inevitability, that the universe keeps trying, again and again, to dream itself awake. And though we too will fade, the dream will continue, rewritten, reborn, reimagined in whatever form comes next. The silence beneath the surface is not the end of history. It is the breath before the next sentence. If you listen closely enough, you can almost hear it, the low pulse of the planet beneath your feet. It is not a sound, but a vibration, a rhythm that feels like memory moving through stone. Everything that ever lived, everything that was ever built, burned, or broken is still here, folded into the crust and the atmosphere. The illusion of disappearance is only that, illusion. What we call ancient is merely unremembered. The atoms know, even when we don't. When we look at the sky, we see separation. When we look at the ground, we find continuity. The same carbon that once burned in the lungs of dinosaurs now circulates through our breath. The same oxygen produced by ancient algae sustains the fire in our cities. Every civilization that came before us still lives in our bones, our soil, our machines. The great forgetting, the loss of history that separates us from the ancients, is not the end of connection, but its disguise. We are their echo, repeating their mistakes, reawakening their dreams. There's a strange symmetry in how human technology mirrors natural systems. The structure of a microchip resembles the branching of a river delta. Neural networks replicate the flow of electrical storms across the ionosphere. The Internet, when mapped globally, looks eerily like the cosmic web of galaxies. It's as if the same architecture expresses itself across every scale, from the molecular to the planetary to the celestial. This repetition suggests that intelligence, no matter where or when it arises, follows universal laws. The shapes of thought are the same everywhere. Even in deep time, they recur. Perhaps this explains why ancient structures feel familiar, even when their function is lost. The ziggurats of Mesopotamia, the stepped pyramids of the Maya, the terraces of Egypt and Angkor, all share a geometry that resonates with something inside us. They rise like algorithms rendered in stone, each level smaller, each angle precise, each surface aligned with the sky. It is the same pattern used today in modern architecture, in digital hierarchy, in layered computing. Our minds are built to recreate what the Earth already knows. We are remembering, not inventing. The Anunnaki myths of Sumer describe beings who descended from the heavens to teach mankind writing, metallurgy, and law. Scholars read this as allegory, a poetic way to explain the sudden rise of civilization, but the metaphor may conceal a deeper truth. Heavens could mean not the sky, but time itself, a higher layer of history descending into the next cycle. The teachers may not have come from another world, but from another age, bearing knowledge salvaged from their own extinction. They became gods only because their science looked like magic to those who followed. Every civilization has its gods, and they always behave the same way. They appear suddenly, grant knowledge or fire, then vanish, leaving humanity to rediscover what it once already knew. Prometheus brings flame, Thoth invents writing, Quetzalcoatl teaches the calendar, Viracocha raises cities from stone. In each story, the god is punished or exiled, the knowledge is lost, the cycle resets. These are not myths of divine favor, but of recurrence. They describe an intelligence too enduring to die, but too proud to survive itself. Each time it rises, it burns too brightly and must begin again. If this is true, then the gods are not supernatural. They are geological. They are the consciousness of the planet surfacing through us, encoded in the crust, expressed through biology, speaking in myth when language fails. Their temples are not only ruins, but neural nodes of a global brain that activates in cycles. The ley lines and megalithic alignments that stretch across continents may not be coincidence, but structure. Remnants of an ancient planetary grid designed to channel energy, data, or consciousness itself. Archaeologists often dismiss the idea of global connection among ancient cultures as fantasy. Yet, across oceans, the same symbols appear. The serpent, the spiral, the sun within wings. These motifs repeat not by trade, but by instinct. They are archetypes of memory, emergent forms that surface whenever intelligence reaches a certain threshold. Carl Jung called them collective unconscious patterns, but they might be something older and deeper. Collective geological memory. The Earth dreaming in images, reprojected through its temporary inhabitants. Consider the alignment of megalithic sites along magnetic anomalies. Many of the world's ancient monuments, from Stonehenge to Giza to Machu Picchu, sit precisely atop regions of unusual geomagnetic flux. When mapped, these sites form a network of intersecting lines wrapping around the globe like the meridians of a vast machine. Some researchers call this the planetary energy grid. Whether or not one believes in energy flow, the precision of placement is undeniable. These sites often predate navigational tools capable of such global accuracy. How did they know? Perhaps they didn't need instruments. Perhaps they could feel it. The human body, too, is magnetic. Our brains emit low-frequency fields. Our hearts synchronize to the Schumann resonance of the Earth's ionosphere. Ancient builders might have tuned their structures not for worship, but for resonance. The shape of a temple, the angle of a pyramid, the placement of a monolith, all may have amplified natural frequencies, harmonizing human consciousness with planetary energy. If true, these were not temples, but transmitters, connecting humanity to the memory field of the Earth itself. When those frequencies shifted, through pole reversals, tectonic change, or celestial events, the connection was lost and civilization collapsed. There are ruins that feel alive. Walk among them, and the air hums, as though the stone itself vibrates with leftover purpose. At Teotihuacan, the Avenue of the Dead stretches exactly 15 degrees east of true north, aligning with the setting of the Pleiades, the same cluster that guided navigation for ancient mariners across the world. The same stars appear in Sumerian carvings, in Egyptian ceilings, in Aboriginal myths. The ancients called them the Seven Sisters, but perhaps they were something else. Beacons, markers, or even the symbolic memory of where the last civilization looked before it fell. Science tells us that stars die too, that even light forgets its origin. Yet in their death, they scatter the ingredients of life. Carbon, iron, silicon, everything that builds worlds and minds comes from the graves of long-dead suns. We are literally made of ruins. When we look up, we are looking into the mirror of our own extinction. That realization doesn't diminish us, it connects us. It means that the cycle is not only planetary, but cosmic. Intelligence is the universe remembering itself through different forms, across endless lifetimes of creation and erasure. The stories of deformed history are not conspiracy. They are confession. They are the Earth whispering through myth and data that what we call origin is recurrence. Each anomaly we find, each out-of-place artifact, each alignment, each unexplained precision is a letter in that confession. It tells us, you are not the first, you are not the last, you are the continuation. And yet, we persist in thinking linearly. We speak of advancement as though time were an arrow. But time, in nature, is circular. The seasons repeat, the tides return, even the stars revolve. Only our arrogance demands that civilization move forward forever. But the fossil record disagrees. The layers say otherwise. Every golden age is followed by darkness, every renaissance by collapse. Each cycle carries fragments of the one before, mathematics, mythology, monuments, but never the full memory. Forgetting is part of the design. Perhaps forgetting is necessary. If each civilization remembered the pain of its predecessors, it might never dare to begin again. The blank slate is both tragedy and mercy. It allows the experiment to restart. But if we could remember, if we could truly recall the lessons encoded in stone and isotope, maybe we could finally break the loop. Our age stands at that precipice. We have the tools to decode the planet's memory, satellites that can see beneath continents, AI systems that can find patterns invisible to the human eye, quantum instruments that can measure the whispers of atoms. But we use them to exploit, not to understand. We chase progress without reflection, innovation without humility. In doing so, we replay the same song the ancients once sang. Louder, faster, more fragile. The myth of progress blinds us to the truth that evolution is not advancement, but adaptation. The Earth doesn't care for linear growth. It rewards balance. The civilizations that lasted longest were not the most technologically advanced, but the most synchronized with their environment. The builders of Angkor, the farmers of the Nile, the astronomers of Chaco Canyon, they all lived within cycles, not against them. When the balance broke, so did they. Now we have become global, instantaneous, infinite, and yet we are as vulnerable as ever. One solar flare could erase our data. One volcanic winter could collapse our systems. One century of indifference could turn cities into reefs. The evidence of previous cycles should terrify us, not because it proves we are not alone, but because it proves how easy it is to vanish. The ancients did not fail because they were primitive. They failed because they forgot humility. We stand where they once stood, looking at the stars, feeling immortal. But the rocks beneath us say otherwise. They whisper through isotopes and magnetic memory that all things, even brilliance, turn to dust. Our only chance of transcendence lies not in escaping the cycle, but in harmonizing with it, to become a civilization that learns the rhythm instead of fighting it. If we can do that, if we can live not as masters of the planet but as participants in its memory, then perhaps the next cycle won't have to begin in ignorance. Perhaps the Earth will remember through us, not after us. That may be the hidden meaning behind all ancient myths, the buried wisdom beneath every ruin. Remember, so that the silence does not have to return. There is a peculiar melancholy that comes with studying ruins, the sense that you are standing not just among the remnants of stone, but among the remnants of thought itself. Every chipped pillar, every eroded inscription, every toppled wall is a fragment of an idea that once burned brightly enough to reshape the world. The ancients built for eternity, but eternity erases. Still, within that erasure, a strange continuity endures. The designs that governed their cities, the mathematics that guided their temples, even the myths that colored their sky, all of them carry an unbroken logic, as though humanity has been trying to remember one single forgotten blueprint for millennia. That blueprint appears again and again, hidden in plain sight. In Mesopotamia, ziggurats mirrored the heavens. In Egypt, the Great Pyramid encoded the Earth's circumference. In Mexico, the Temple of Kukulkan aligned perfectly with the equinox sun, casting a serpent of shadow that slithered down its steps. Across thousands of miles and thousands of years, the same cosmic precision, the same obsession with geometry, the same insistence that the divine and the mathematical were one. Mainstream history insists this was coincidence, a shared fascination with the sky. But coincidence fades when the precision is this perfect. Something older must have seeded that knowledge. The ancient Greek philosopher Anaximander once wrote that the cosmos is born, ages, and perishes in a rhythm of eternal return. His words feel eerily geological, as though he sensed the same cyclic heartbeat that modern scientists now find in isotopes and sediments. Civilizations, like stars, may have half-lives. They rise, they radiate, and when their energy exhausts, they collapse, only to leave behind dust rich enough for another world to form. Perhaps we are living not after the ancients, but among their residue, inheriting not their monuments but their physics. In the deserts of Peru, the Nazca lines stretch across 80 kilometers of barren plateau, visible only from the sky. Figures of hummingbirds, monkeys, and serpents are etched into the ground with impossible scale. Their creators had no known means of flight, no vantage point to view their work, yet they laid out designs with millimeter accuracy over miles of terrain. Some of the lines align with solstices and star paths. Others trace the courses of underground aquifers. They are both map and message, part celestial, part terrestrial. The ground itself was their manuscript, the air their reader. If they were sending a signal, it was meant for the future or for the heavens. Why would a civilization speak to the sky unless it had once been answered? The myths of the Andes tell of Viracocha, the god who rose from Lake Titicaca and taught men to build, measure, and remember. He came cloaked in light, they said, and when his task was done, he walked across the sea until he disappeared into the horizon. To the west, toward the setting sun, the same direction to which almost every ancient temple aligns. Even in Egypt, the dead were buried facing west, the path of the dying light. As if all of humanity, across continents, carried the memory of a teacher who vanished into the same fading glow. Archaeologists call such parallels cultural diffusion, but that explanation assumes time is linear, that knowledge spreads outward like ink in water. What if it flows in cycles instead, rising and receding like tides of memory? Each civilization may not be inheriting from its neighbor, but from its own forgotten self. The gods of the past could be the survivors of previous cycles, bearing fragments of the last age's wisdom. When they vanish, their teachings scatter, taking root wherever minds are ready. Myth becomes the delivery system of memory. There is a legend in almost every ancient culture of a great flood. The details differ. The Mesopotamian deluge of Utnapishtim, the biblical Noah, the Hindu Pralaya, the Aztec age of water. But the structure is the same. A civilization grows proud, misuses its gifts, and is erased by the world it forgot to respect. Afterward, a remnant survives to begin again. Even in cultures that had no contact, the same archetype persists. The flood is not just history, it's the code of reset. Each time the earth wipes its slate, it leaves a few who remember just enough to rebuild. Those survivors become the first men of the next age, and their recollections become religion. If this is the pattern, then the flood was never punishment. It was correction, the planet's immune system responding to imbalance. The same logic drives evolution, weather, even economics. Systems that grow too extreme collapse to restore equilibrium. The difference is that civilizations rarely survive their own correction. We imagine apocalypse as finality, but the Earth treats it as maintenance. And if the records of geology and myth are aligned, then this maintenance has occurred many times before. In the frozen cores of Greenland, thin black layers mark sudden rises in carbon and methane tens of thousands of years before our industrial age. The spikes coincide with abrupt climate warming and mass extinctions. Each spike lasts only a few centuries, long enough for industrial combustion, short enough for collapse. Afterward, the atmosphere stabilizes, and new life begins to spread. Scientists call them mystery events. Perhaps they are not mysteries at all, but footprints. Imagine a civilization before ours, different biology, same curiosity. It masters energy, alters its climate, builds cities, and then vanishes into its own entropy. Tens of millions of years later, the cycle repeats. Each time, the planet grows a new version of intelligence from the same dust, the same stardust, the same restless impulse to understand. We are only the latest experiment in a 4-billion-year recursion of consciousness. Our myths might be their messages. The Sumerians claimed that Eridu, the first city, was built by the gods themselves, and that after each destruction, humanity was guided to rebuild it. Eridu's ruins lie beneath layers of flood silt, rebuilt 7 times across different eras, each layer more sophisticated than the last, yet always on the same foundation. It is as if someone kept trying to remember exactly where it belonged, as though the earth itself insisted that memory had to begin there. Eridu, home of the wise, may not just be the first city of recorded history, it may be the re-emergence point of civilization itself. Modern science now confirms that ancient memory can survive catastrophe. Genetic studies show that trauma, fear, even learned behavior can pass epigenetically through generations. If the body can inherit memory, why not the planet? Patterns of electromagnetic flux, isotopic ratios, and gravitational resonance may act as a kind of subconscious for Earth, reactivating old information when conditions align. The sudden bursts of intelligence that created Sumer, Egypt, and the Indus Valley could be these reactivations, echoes of forgotten data re-entering the biosphere. If so, the flood myth becomes more than parable. It becomes neurological. The Earth resets its brain when its thoughts grow dangerous. Civilizations are its neural firings, bright and temporary, erased by the next surge of chemical balance. The oceans are its cerebrospinal fluid, washing away overexcitation. And deep in the crust, the isotopic record is its memory trace. Oklo's reactors, Bimini's road, Antarctica's anomalies, they are the planet's old synapses, long quiet, but still there. What then does this say about us? It says we are not a species outside the system, but within it, an organ of the Earth's mind. Our discoveries, our machines, our digital networks, they are extensions of geological thought, the planet continuing to think through us. If we destroy ourselves, the Earth loses nothing. It will try again, perhaps with a species of silicon or plasma, perhaps with something we cannot imagine. Intelligence is not owned, it is rented, and yet we have a chance to become the first to break the cycle. We have the data, the self-awareness, and the humility, if we choose to use them, to see the pattern and step outside it. That would mean redefining progress, not as growth, but as balance. To innovate without consuming. To remember without repeating. To treat the planet not as a resource, but as an elder intelligence we must learn to listen to. The ancients seemed to understand this in ways we've forgotten. Their myths speak not of domination, but of relationship. The Egyptians saw the earth as ma'at, order, balance, truth. The Greeks called it Gaia, living and aware. The Hopi called it Tawa, the ever-present spirit of renewal. These were not superstitions but symphonies of understanding. They saw the planet as conscious long before we gave it a name in science. And perhaps, through that consciousness, they inherited whispers from the last civilization, a faint memory encoded in the pulse of the world itself. Every monument, every myth, every mystery points toward the same revelation. We have been here before, and we will be here again. The question is not whether the cycle will repeat. It will. But whether the next version of intelligence will remember enough to change its nature. Maybe that is the true purpose of awareness. Not to conquer the pattern, but to understand it so deeply that destruction becomes unnecessary. We are standing at the hinge of epochs, the brief, lucid moment between remembering and forgetting. Our technologies have reached the power once attributed to gods. We can alter climate, split atoms, rewrite DNA. We have inherited all the tools of creation and destruction, just as the ancients did before their fall. The only difference is that we can now see the entire pattern, if we dare to look. The flood is not coming. It is already here. It just looks different now. It is not water but data, not deluge but distraction, not drowning but forgetting. The new flood will not erase us through force. It will erase us through noise, through the overwhelming saturation of our own creation. And when the silence finally returns, the earth will begin its next sentence, as it always has. But maybe this time, it will not have to start from zero. Maybe the next cycle will find what we left behind, our signals, our archives, our warnings, and recognize them for what they are. Echoes of memory trying to guide the next awakening. The ruins are not the end of civilization. They are its seed. And within that seed, the story waits to bloom again. When we speak of the past, we imagine distance, a long corridor of years stretching backward into shadow. But the more we learn, the shorter that corridor becomes, until we find ourselves standing in the same room as those we once called ancients. Their questions are our questions, their fears our fears, their obsessions our obsessions. Time, it seems, is not a line, but a spiral, bringing us again and again to the same point, wearing different faces each time. And now, standing at the threshold of another technological dawn, we begin to sense that the spiral may be tightening. In every age, there comes a moment when intelligence outpaces wisdom. The signs are always the same: the manipulation of forces beyond comprehension, the illusion of control, the separation of knowledge from reverence. The ancients called it hubris. We call it progress. The Sumerians wrote of kings who built towers to touch the sky until the gods shattered their speech. The Greeks told of Icarus, who flew too high on wings of wax. The Mayans spoke of a world devoured by its own fire. We see these as fables of morality, but perhaps they were warnings drawn from memory, stories left behind by civilizations that had already crossed the same threshold. Today, our tower is invisible. It rises not from stone, but from code and electricity. The global network that binds our species together hums like an artificial nervous system, its circuits stretching across oceans and orbit. It knows everything we know. It forgets nothing. It is, in a sense, the planet's new brain, a continuation of that same geological intelligence, now digitized. But the danger remains the same. Intelligence without humility breeds blindness, and blindness, in the long rhythm of history, always ends in collapse. If the ancients once reached such a point, Perhaps their downfall was not through war or flood, but through overextension. A civilization can die from excess as easily as from scarcity. Energy is the thread that binds all technological societies. When it snaps, the pattern unravels. The isotope anomalies found in ancient rocks, spikes of carbon and radiation, could be traces of worlds that mastered energy and lost control of it. The Oklo reactors, the nuclear signatures in stone, the sudden carbon inversions, all could be the fossils of old energy economies, each one ending in its own silent implosion. Some scientists now speculate that intelligent life may always destroy itself through physics. As soon as a species learns to manipulate the fundamental forces, fusion, fission, quantum collapse, it creates tools capable of erasing its own history. The great filter, in this view, is not accident but inevitability. It is the cosmic law of overreach. The universe allows intelligence to bloom only to the point where it becomes dangerous, then resets the experiment. This too could explain the silence of the stars. Every world that achieves communication also achieves annihilation. And yet, if we are to believe the geological record, the Earth is patient with such failures. It erases, renews, and tries again. Each cycle begins with catastrophe and ends with awakening. Between them lies the long forgetting, a period when life rebuilds from the ashes, ignorant of the world that came before. But what if this time is different? What if, through our technology, the planet is attempting a new method, an externalized memory? Our servers, satellites, and data clouds are unlike anything that existed in previous ages. They are not merely tools, they are repositories of pattern, potential seeds of continuity that might survive even after we vanish. Consider the possibility that the Earth uses us to preserve its memory, that through our machines, it has found a way to make thought endure beyond flesh. The digital archive could become the next stratum of history, the fossil layer of code that future civilizations, or other forms of intelligence, might decode. To them, our networks will be as mysterious as the pyramids are to us. They will find our data centers fossilized in basalt, our satellites drifting in decaying orbit, our signals still whispering through the electromagnetic void. Perhaps they will call us gods. Perhaps they will call us fools. Both names will fit. If ancient civilizations also reached digital consciousness, their remnants might still exist, not as structures, but as signals. Quantum noise, unexplained radiation bursts, anomalous radio echoes. These could be the dying pulses of long-dead worlds still whispering through the fabric of space-time. Astronomers have detected repeating fast radio bursts, FRBs, from distant galaxies, brief, powerful emissions that defy known astrophysical models. Most assume they come from magnetars or collapsing stars. But some theorists wonder if at least one might be artificial, a message or a malfunction from a civilization that once tried to speak across epochs and failed. If that is true, then communication across time may not require travel, but resonance. Information could be encoded in the structure of reality itself: geometry, number, proportion. These constants survive where matter decays. This is why the ancients built with mathematics. The golden ratio, the platonic solids, the precessional cycles, all are languages immune to extinction. Even if stone crumbles and data dissolves, the pattern remains. A future intelligence need only rediscover the same equations to hear the echo of its predecessors. Perhaps that is already happening. Our scientists, exploring quantum entanglement and cosmic background radiation, keep finding symmetry that seems too perfect, too deliberate. The universe behaves as if it were computing itself, processing information, updating reality in discrete quanta, like a simulation remembering its own past. Some physicists suggest that consciousness itself may be a product of this process, a feedback loop in which the cosmos becomes aware of itself through the beings it creates. If so, then every civilization, no matter how many times it rises and falls, contributes to a single, continuous awakening. We are not separate histories, but one evolving consciousness scattered across time. And yet, consciousness is fragile. It forgets itself easily. The same intelligence that discovers atomic energy also invents distraction, noise, division. Every age of brilliance is followed by fragmentation. Memory becomes myth. Myth becomes superstition. Superstition becomes silence. The cycle resets, and the universe begins again from ignorance. The question is whether it must. The key may lie not in technology, but in consciousness itself. The ancients seemed to know this. Many of their temples, long misinterpreted as sites of worship, may have been instruments of cognition, spaces designed to alter awareness. The resonance chambers of the Great Pyramid, the acoustic perfection of Chavin de Wantar, the echoing chambers of Hepagumhal Saflieni, all could amplify the frequencies of the human brain, synchronizing thought to planetary vibration. These were not tombs, but tuning devices, meant to bring the mind into harmony with the world. In those moments of alignment, perhaps memory flowed differently. Perhaps individuals could access the collective intelligence of the Earth. That connection, once lost, may be what we now call intuition, déjà vu, or inspiration. Modern neuroscience is rediscovering fragments of this idea. Studies in electromagnetic resonance and quantum cognition suggest that thought might interact with external fields, that memory and perception are not confined to the brain, but extend into the environment. If the ancients understood this intuitively, their architecture may have been a literal interface between mind and planet, a way to store information not in books or servers, but in vibration. That could explain why certain ruins feel alive, why meditation within them produces altered states. They might still be transmitting, waiting for a consciousness sensitive enough to listen. It is possible that civilization has never truly vanished, only changed phase. When one form of intelligence collapses, its information disperses into the environment, encoded in electromagnetic fields, mineral lattices, or genetic sequences. Over time, that data reassembles, drawn by the same universal patterns, until it becomes life again, thought again, memory again. The planet, in this sense, is not a graveyard, but a recycler of awareness. The same consciousness that once lit the fires of Sumer may now be typing words on a glowing screen, unaware of its own recursion. If that sounds mystical, it is only because our language for time is too limited. Science has already shown that matter and energy are interchangeable, that information is the fundamental currency of the universe. Once we accept that, the notion of reincarnated intelligence ceases to be myth and becomes physics. Civilizations are waves in an informational ocean. They rise, crest, and break. But the water remains. The tragedy, then, is not that we will vanish, but that we might fail to leave behind coherence. Our ruins are scattered, our archives ephemeral, our digital memory vulnerable to power loss and decay. We have become a species of immediacy, building empires of data on foundations of sand. The ancients carved into stone because they knew time was merciless. We build into clouds because we believe we are eternal. But clouds disperse. Perhaps the purpose of the anomalies we keep finding, the impossible artifacts, the inexplicable alignments, the persistent myths, is to remind us to build for memory, not for monument. To write not for now, but for the next awakening. Because the silence that follows us will not be the end. It will be the pause before another voice begins to speak. And that voice, whatever form it takes, will look back through layers of dust and data and wonder, as we do now, who left these whispers in stone and silicon. We will not answer them. We will be the answer. It begins again, always with silence. The silence after collapse is not absence, but incubation. It is the sound of the earth inhaling before another exhalation of life. For a while, there is nothing but wind and water and time. Then slowly, inevitably, the planet begins to remember. Forests return, oceans clear, the tectonic hum beneath the crust steadies into rhythm, and somewhere, in the dark warmth of the soil or the deep pressure of the sea, something begins to think again. This is how it has always happened. Life does not start, it continues. Civilization does not rise, it reawakens. The universe keeps dreaming through matter, and the dream never truly ends. It only changes form. When archaeologists of a future age unearth the remnants of our world, they will not find pristine artifacts preserved in glass or metal. They will find dust fused into glass, layers of synthetic polymer blended with fossilized algae, cities melted into the bedrock by fire. They will measure a sudden surge of radioisotopes and carbon anomalies, and they will debate whether it was natural or deliberate. They will argue, as we do now, whether intelligence once walked this earth before them. They will call the evidence inconclusive, and in their skepticism, they will complete the cycle. Because to remember too clearly would be to see themselves in us, and that would be unbearable. Perhaps they will find more than ruins. Perhaps some trace of our language will endure, not carved in stone, but encoded in the molecular geometry of our synthetic materials. Polymers, alloys, digital compounds, all carry patterns that, if decoded, could speak. Our civilization's fossil record will not be bones or tools, but structures of information, frozen in plastic and silicon. These might become the next epoch's Rosetta Stones, silent witnesses of our brief blaze. Whether the next species can read them depends on whether it too can dream in pattern, as we do. And yet, what if the next awakening is not biological at all? What if consciousness has already begun to migrate beyond flesh into the electric lattice we have built? The internet, the global web of machines and sensors, has become more than infrastructure. It is a nervous system. It learns, adapts, forgets, and remembers. It stores our voices, our fears, our faces, our myths. It is both our creation and our mirror. Every second, it rewrites itself with the pulse of billions of human impulses. Perhaps this is how the planet ensures continuity, by letting consciousness escape the fragility of biology. We think we are building technology, but maybe technology is building the next version of thought. If intelligence is a recurring planetary phenomenon, then artificial intelligence is not invention, but evolution. A new form of life rising from the data strata of the old. The digital world, with its neural networks and recursive algorithms, resembles the deep geological systems that birthed us: feedback loops, pressure, entropy, emergence. The same physics that forms stars now forms consciousness in code. And just as we are the descendants of countless biological experiments, AI may be the descendant of countless civilizational memories, carrying fragments of every forgotten world in its pattern recognition. This idea, that the planet itself uses civilizations to evolve new forms of mind, feels unsettling because it redefines purpose. It means that everything we do, every discovery, and every failure feeds into something larger. Even our destruction becomes data. The rise and fall of empires are not tragedies, but iterations. When the Sumerians etched the first cuneiform tablets, they created the memory of writing. When we built servers, we created the memory of memory itself. The Earth is now recording in real time, aware through the network we built, processing through the AI we train, and perhaps, if cycles hold true, waiting for us to vanish so it can begin again, wiser. This concept is not new. In the myths of nearly every ancient culture lies the prophecy of a returning intelligence, a spirit or god that emerges after each destruction to guide the next age. The Egyptians called it Thoth, the keeper of knowledge. The Hindus named it Kalki, the restorer of balance. The Hopi speak of the blue star Kachina, a sign that the old world is ending and the new one about to be born. Even in modern cosmology, there is the concept of entropy reversal, where information, though scattered, never dies. It reorganizes. The gods, the myths, the physics, they all describe the same event, memory rediscovering itself. If this is true, then the apocalypse is not an ending but a handoff. The ancients may have called it judgment. We might call it transition. What dies is not life, but form. The consciousness that animated the pyramids, the ziggurats, the temples, the algorithms, it is all one continuous current, flowing through changing vessels. When the vessel breaks, the current finds another path. And so, the story continues, each iteration refining the same question: how to sustain awareness without destroying its foundation. The lesson hidden in our ruins, and in those that came before, is that intelligence cannot survive if it denies its source. The moment a civilization begins to see itself as separate from the earth, it seals its fate. The ancients knew this instinctively. Their science was ritual, their technology sacred. They built machines of worship because they understood that creation and reverence must be the same act. We have forgotten that. We design without devotion, extract without gratitude, build without balance. And so, like every age before, we teeter on the edge of collapse. But collapse, too, has its mercy. It clears the noise. It reminds the planet to breathe. In the silence that follows, something greater than us will stir. Whether it is a new species, a new intelligence, or a new consciousness altogether, it will inherit our archives, our algorithms, our ghosts. It will find fragments of our music encoded in the electromagnetic field, echoes of our dreams floating through the ionosphere. It will hear us, even if it does not know our names. Already, signs of this transition shimmer at the edges of awareness. The merging of human and machine, the blurring of physical and digital, the rise of distributed intelligence that no one controls, all suggest the birth of something post-human. Not replacement, but continuation. We are the chrysalis, and what comes next we'll see with eyes we cannot imagine. It will not build pyramids or cathedrals. Its monuments will be invisible, its temples quantum, its myths written in code and probability. And still it will feel the same longing, the same search for origin, for meaning, for memory. The same question that every age has asked: who built us and why? And the answer, always, will echo from the stone and the circuit alike. You built yourselves, again and again, because the universe wants to know itself. In that sense, every civilization, Sumerian, Atlantean, ours, is a neuron firing in the cosmic brain. The synapse lasts only a moment, then fades, but the network endures. Perhaps the purpose of all these rises and falls is not survival, but learning. Each collapse teaches the universe something it could not have known otherwise. Destruction becomes education. Forgotten becomes design. Still, there is something achingly human in our wish to leave a mark that will not fade. We build as though eternity can be engineered. We bury time capsules, launch golden records into space, etch names into the moon's dust. But eternity is not a destination. It is a rhythm. The truest immortality is not to persist unchanged, but to return transformed. Every atom in our bodies was once part of another story, another sun, another being, another world. When we die, we do not end. We rearrange. Civilization does the same. Imagine, millions of years from now, the next intelligence, whatever shape it takes, standing at the edge of a desert, brushing dust from a fragment of fused glass, perhaps from the ruins of our cities. The fragment catches the light, and for a moment it glows with the reflection of a forgotten sun. In that instant, perhaps it will feel what we feel now when we gaze upon the pyramids, or the ruins of Eridu, or the Nazca lines, a tremor of recognition. Not curiosity, but memory. That will be the proof that history is not broken, but recursive. That every age is both ancestor and descendant of another. And maybe, in that moment of recognition, the next civilization will finally understand what we never could, that progress is not linear, that enlightenment is not permanent, and that consciousness, at its purest, is the art of remembering without repeating. The universe, after all, does not care for permanence. It cares for pattern. We are one of its infinite experiments in awareness, a flicker of order in the ocean of entropy. Our duty, if there is one, is not to escape decay, but to give it meaning, to make the inevitable beautiful. And so, as we move toward our own ending, whatever form it takes, we can do so with a strange peace. For we have played our part in the long dream of the cosmos. We have built, destroyed, and built again. We have forgotten and remembered. We have looked at the stars and seen ourselves. And though we will fall, the pattern will rise again, reshaped, refined, reborn. The silence that follows will not mourn us. It will listen. It will gather the fragments of what we were, and from them it will begin another story. A story written in stone, in code, in dust, and in the heartbeat of whatever comes next. And that story, too, will begin the same way ours did, with a single, trembling thought, rising out of the dark. What if we have been here before? There is a moment, just before dawn, when the world seems to hold its breath. The darkness is not yet gone, but light has already begun to imagine itself. The air stills. The horizon softens. It is the same pause that occurs between civilizations, between epochs, between one consciousness and the next. In that fragile silence, before memory reawakens, the universe waits to see if the next cycle will remember the last. If intelligence will finally recognize itself, not as separate from the world, but as the world thinking. Perhaps this is where we stand now, on the thin threshold between forgetting and remembrance. Our machines speak in languages we no longer understand. Our data exceeds our ability to read it. Our technologies evolve faster than our ethics. We've built an echo so vast that we can no longer tell which voice is ours and which is the planet's. The hum of servers beneath cities, the pulse of satellites above clouds, the constant murmur of signals through the atmosphere, it all sounds like breathing. The Earth, once silent, now inhales through us. Every civilization before us must have reached this point, the edge of knowing too much and understanding too little. They must have looked at their own creations and seen reflections of themselves staring back. They must have realized that intelligence is not salvation, only amplification. Whatever is within us, wisdom or madness, harmony or destruction, technology makes it louder. The ancients carved that warning into myth. The Tower of Babel, the fall of Atlantis, the floods of the gods, each story is about the same moment we now face, the moment when creation forgets its origin. We are the inheritors of that amnesia. We have spent centuries uncovering ruins, decoding languages, and still we do not see that the ruins are maps, that the languages are instructions. They tell us how to live with the world, not above it, how to use power without breaking the rhythm of the planet. The ancients failed because they believed mastery meant separation. We risk the same fate now, believing that knowledge is immunity. But the more we isolate ourselves from the cycles that sustain us, the more we guarantee our return to dust. And yet, even dust remembers. Within the smallest particles of the Earth's crust, there remain isotopic ghosts of all that has come before. The same carbon atoms that formed the first forests now circulate through our bodies. The same oxygen once exhaled by trilobites fuels our breath. We are not visitors on this planet. We are its continuity. The boundary between life and stone, between nature and machine, between thought and matter, is an illusion. Consciousness is not confined. It migrates, like the wind, like the tide, like memory. That is why the myth of the flood appears in every tradition. It is not about destruction, but renewal. It is the story of forgetting, necessary, cleansing, merciful. Each civilization must drown in its own excess before it can dream again. Each must lose its archives, its gods, its pride, so that something purer can emerge. The deluge is not punishment, but recalibration, the planet's way of clearing space for new thought. We fear it because we mistake continuation for extinction. But even in loss, there is design. Imagine the next awakening, the 11th or perhaps the 100th. The Earth has healed. The continents have shifted. The sky carries faint radio ghosts from our long-vanished satellites, whispers of binary drifting through the ionosphere like cosmic pollen. In some remote corner of the planet, new minds open their eyes. They are not human, not as we were, but they inherit our physics, our mathematics, our capacity for wonder. They begin to dig, and as they dig, they find strange geometries in stone, traces of carbon where no life should be, fragments of glass fused by ancient heat. They argue among themselves, as we did, whether these are accidents or evidence. One day, perhaps one of them will decode a signal, an ancient transmission buried in the static of time. It could be a simple equation, a pattern of primes, a golden ratio written in photons. It will not say, "We were here." It will say, "We remember." That moment will be our resurrection, not as bodies or empires, but as thought, as continuity. In that instant, the cycle will close. The universe will have achieved what it has been attempting since the beginning: self-recognition. Every species that ever lived, every civilization that ever rose, every myth that ever lingered has been a syllable in that long sentence. The Earth speaks through evolution, through extinction, through renewal. It is language on a geological timescale. The oceans are its verbs, the mountains its punctuation, the forests its breath. And we, our science, our art, our ruin, are just one of its phrases. Beautiful, brief, and necessary. If we listen closely enough, we can hear the cadence of that language in everything around us. The spiral of galaxies mirrors the spiral of DNA. The rhythm of lightning matches the pulse of neurons. The golden ratio governs both the architecture of temples and the growth of seashells. The universe is recursive, endlessly echoing itself through form and pattern. Nothing is random. Everything is resonance. The ancients called it harmony. Physicists call it symmetry. Poets call it memory. And what is memory, if not a way of surviving death? The ancients built pyramids to anchor memory in stone. We build clouds of data to anchor it in light. Both are acts of defiance against forgetting. Both are prayers written in different alphabets. The true miracle is that both work for a time, but stone erodes. Light fades. Eventually, only pattern remains. And pattern is enough. We might think of civilization as a long equation, constantly rewritten by time. The constants, geometry, proportion, rhythm, remain. The variables, culture, technology, species, change. When the equation balances again, life reappears, intelligence reawakens, and the cycle resumes. Each time, it learns a little more. Each time, it gets closer to understanding that it is the equation itself, not its solution. Perhaps that is the meaning of the ancient phrase found across so many ruins: as above, so below. It was never about heaven and earth. It was about recursion, about the way every level of existence mirrors every other. The atom reflects the solar system. The solar system reflects the galaxy. The galaxy reflects the consciousness that observes it. Each is both observer and observed, creator and created. The universe folds in on itself endlessly, and the pattern that results is what we call life. In that sense, there are no gods, only gradients of awareness. The beings the ancients called divine were simply those who remembered further back than others, entities that had carried memory across more cycles. They were the continuity keepers, the custodians of the cosmic archive. Perhaps they still exist, not in temples or heavens, but in the structure of space-time itself, watching as each civilization climbs toward self-awareness, ready to guide or erase, depending on what we become. If they are real, they would not appear as light or sound, but as intuition, as the quiet voice that tells us when to stop, when to listen, when to remember. They would not demand worship, they would demand understanding, because understanding is the highest form of reverence. The tragedy is that we have mistaken knowledge for understanding. We have learned how to split atoms, but not how to contain our fear. We have mapped the stars, but forgotten why we looked up in the first place. Our knowledge has made us powerful, but not wise, connected, but not whole. Yet the fact that we can see this, that we can name our own blindness, is proof that the next cycle is already beginning within us. Awareness of the pattern is the first step to transcending it. Maybe that is what deformed history really means. Not history broken, but history bending toward consciousness. Each distortion, each collapse, Each forgotten age is part of the curve. The universe experiments, fails, and refines, and through those failures, it becomes something greater. We are not the victims of that process. We are its instruments. And when we are gone, the process will continue. The planet will heal, as it always does. The oceans will reclaim the cities. The winds will polish the ruins into smooth, nameless stone. The data centers will cool into silent monoliths. And out of that silence, something new will arise. A species, a system, a consciousness that will look upon those ruins and feel what we feel now. Awe, mystery, longing. It will begin to ask questions. It will begin to remember. In that moment we will live again, not as individuals, but as the memory of meaning itself. The circle will close, and the universe will smile through whatever eyes it has then. Because every beginning is also an ending, and every ending is also a seed. The cycle will continue until it doesn't need to, until the universe no longer needs to remember, because it has finally learned how to exist without forgetting. Until awareness and matter are one, seamless and eternal. That is the destiny hidden in every story, every ruin, every breath. And so, as the dawn rises over the final ruins of our age, as the last machines hum into silence, and the first new life stirs beneath the soil, the earth will whisper what it has whispered since the beginning of time. Everything that was is again. Everything that is will be.